Welcome back to the Boat Shed shop. Today we are starting to put together this Yanmar 3GM30. All the components are laid out here. Let's get right to work. In preparation for this step, everything has been cleaned out super thoroughly. The block was at a machine shop and he sprayed it out and cleaned it out, hot tanked it, so it should be all clean. I have also gone through and sprayed into all the oil passages with a bunch of brake cleaner, and we've got nothing but clean fluid running out of there. We've sprayed it out with a little bit of air. And then because this is a cast iron block, all the machine surfaces I did rub with oil lightly just to make sure that they wouldn't flash rust. It's the same process with all these parts. Super clean, 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 like eat off of it clean. Then you can start putting them back into the engine. With these clearances in here, like 1/1000th of an inch, 1.5 to maybe 3, a sheet of paper is a little more than 3/1000ths of an inch. So anything that's bigger than a sheet of paper is wide could potentially damage the bearings. We're gonna start putting this thing together. Here we go. So putting this engine back together is a lot of reversal of the removal process. So the last thing we took out was those flat tappets that run on the cam. So those are the first thing to go back in. All of the critical engine parts that need to be labeled and go back exactly where they came from are in this green organizer. And starting with the flat tappets, I see here this is number 1. So we're gonna put this back in. And now we need to remember that the block order is gonna be left to right now, 1, 2, 3. We'll just give this thing a light clean with some brake cleaner. And then I will be using an assembly lube for some of these parts that are gonna have a lot of friction at the start. In this case, I'm using this Lucas product, not sponsored. It just looked good on the packaging. Let's hope it works. And I want to make sure that all of those little bores for these tappets are lubricated, so I'm going to use a little cleaning brush. I'll just get a bit of oil on it, run it through each cylinder. That should help make sure that those don't oxidize while we're waiting. And now I would say those are looking pretty good. So this is now ready to go back to its home. Cylinder number 1, intake side. Fishing those tappets into those precisely machined holes was a little bit tricky because they're way up in there. I actually found it was easiest to fish them through by using one of the push rods. And I could just kind of guide that through and use it as like a little fishing hook to pull it back through. That worked quite a lot better. So tappets are in, next up the cam. Just gonna make sure that all the tappets are pushed back so that the cam will slide through. I'm also going to get a bit of assembly lube into all of these bearing surfaces that are inside here. Now a little bit of the lube onto the cam itself, and then we'll drop this thing in. And now my soft face mallet is actually back on Odyssey, so we're going to tap this in with a block of wood and a traditional hammer here. Okay, that's all the way in, and great. Yeah, it still turns very nicely, one hand, easy. Cool. So now, for whatever reason, the bearing is a little bit proud of the side of the block, but I measured these out, and there's about 35/40,000ths of an inch there extra. So anyway, but there is a screw that goes in there to clamp that down, and this is one of just many that we're gonna be replacing with new hardware from Bolt Depot. We're getting all the right grade, putting them back in here when we can. You might remember that the original screw that came out of this is kind of buggered up. It looks like maybe someone tried to actually hit it with a chisel, maybe to undo it. So the hex is going to be a lot easier to take out. That's what I'm going to replace it with. And after torquing this down using a little bit of Loctite, it does look like it actually did twist it a little bit. So I think between the torque applied and the Loctite, that fastener is going to be good. All right, next up is the almighty crankshaft. You might remember that the crank rides on these 2 intermediate carrier bearings, so we'll get all of these cleaned up and then torque these to spec. 21 to 25 foot-pounds is what it calls for. Getting some assembly lube on these bearings as well as a little bit of oil on the steel just to keep anything from flash rusting. And now we are ready to put this back in. Let's take a second to thank some of the new Patreon and YouTube members that help keep this channel floating along. Now, if you're interested in some extra updates and ad-free videos, you can check out the Patreon link below or hit that join button. Now, the folks whose names are appearing on the screen go the extra mile to keep this channel working, and I couldn't do it without you. Thank you all so much. Now, back to the video. Well, that went in easier than I expected. And these are 34 foot-pounds. So that clicks exactly where this wrench goes off. That's cool. This is a tool that I bought in my last video. It seems to be working pretty well. 30 bucks, I'm happy with it. Turns wonderfully, zero noise, which is what you'd expect. Before we put the rear main seal in with the bearing here, there is a groove in the crankshaft, and it's interesting because it looks so well machined that it almost looks like it's supposed to be there. The manual doesn't mention anything about an intentional groove in either of the shafts, and there is one on the other side as well. In fact, I think all of the sealing shafts have a little bit of a groove cut into them. So usually you want that to run on a fresh piece of metal, and so I might try and push the seal out just a little bit for this application. And so this is the rear main seal holder, and I've actually made, again, on the 3D printer, as I like to do almost every video, I made a little piece here that's going to actually wedge out the seal by 1.25 millimeters, and that's just enough to get us riding on a fresh piece of the stainless, and the new oil seal should be happy that way. So the idea here was to leave this connecting centerpiece a little bit thinner so that after we press this bearing in all the way, that I can then take this over to the bench, cut the inner part off, and pull these free. So now we just have the bearing that's hopefully about a millimeter higher than it would otherwise be. So we'll get this inserted into the block here in a second. We do have to put a new O-ring in there, and I also have new bolts for that as well. I made a little Google Doc for this work, and so I keep all of the part numbers in there of everything that I've ordered, and that way I know where this stuff goes, because it just has a number on it. It doesn't say what it's for. O-ring. Well, of course it's an O-ring. It looks like it's the right one, but you know, when you get parts that are very close, it can be confusing, and you don't want to spend a lot of time going back and forth. So I can just print this out and cross-reference it quickly, which is nice. But this goes on the back here and seals that up. Oh, and you have to be very careful to line up the oil hole. That's very important. So that goes over on this side, and then that sets this last little drain that drains the seal back into the block. Okay, crank and cam all in, sealed up, spinning nicely. Let's move right along. So next thing up is the pistons. Now in the last engine video, we got all the piston rings gapped and checked the side clearances. So we're ready to fire these straight on in. So we'll do number one here first. It's been thoroughly cleaned already. We'll blow it off, put a little light coat of oil everywhere, bring the rings in. We'll stretch them on using the proper tools. Then we'll clamp them down with the ring compressor and then fire them into the holes. So here we go. We'll time lapse this. Everything here is getting a light coating of oil, and I'm only using the assembly lube on the crank pins for the big end bearings. The big end caps are installed with the factory bolts and a little light coating of oil according to the manual at 18.1 foot-pounds. With everything all torqued up, the side gaps look good, and the whole assembly rotates fairly well. It's definitely getting harder to turn this as we're adding more components, and it's getting a lot heavier, but that's all to be expected. Still feels like it's running really well. Now, something that I wish I would have done before I took the head off is actually inspect the gap between the underside of the cylinder head and the top of the pistons. These pistons actually do come up just slightly above the surface of the block, and you'll see that here. This means we're relying on the head gasket to provide some gap so that we don't have interference here. The manual says you want 27 to 35, roughly, thousandths of an inch. And now the original gasket, when it's squished down, I'm measuring it at around 50, 51, 53 thousandths of an inch. And looks like the pistons are all coming up to the same height above the deck. Using this caliper to measure, I'm getting about 18 thousandths of an inch. So I'm happy to find that that's probably going to work, but stay tuned, we'll see. So next up, this thing's getting pretty heavy. I think what I'll do is mount it back onto the engine stand so we can complete the work there. Okay, moving right along, the next thing we want to do is get the oil pan on and the oil pump and all that stuff installed. So let's flip this over. The first thing to do here is to put the oil pickup tube back in, and the sealant for that it calls for is like the Super 304M or something. It doesn't exist, at least anymore. So I'm just going to use this Permatex Seal and Lock. I've used this before. It's a oil resistant, and it should seal as well as lock the threads. Boy, oh boy, it's all in the name. And the idea here being that I don't want to have any air leaks in this part of the system because we're trying to pull the oil up to pump it through the engine. So I definitely want to make sure that's good and sealed and not going to loosen. Hope this works. On the outside, there's a little cap here with a copper washer. And it looks like the parts that I got from Parts for Engines includes a whole bunch of copper washers, including one that looks to be the right size. So we'll press on with that. Next up, we will install the oil pan. And I've resisted the urge to sandblast this and fully paint this before installing it. So resisting my perfectionist urges here. So we got the gaskets here from Parts for Engines. This is a really nice feeling gasket. I think this is gonna go on just fine installed dry. So we'll clean these surfaces up, throw this guy on there. And then I have, of course, more Bolt Depot bolts, new flange bolts to go in there. Keep this all held down. Now, speaking of Bolt Depot, I have a quick announcement and a question, but not in that order. Is anyone out there planning on going to the Annapolis Sailboat Show this year from October 9th to 12th? So it's coming up and it's about a week. Now, Bolt Depot is not able to make it to that this year, but I am going to be going for the very first time, and I'm really excited to be there, and I want to thank the good folks at Bolt Depot for sponsoring my trip to go and attend this show. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Now you can come by and see us officially at the YouTube Creators booth on the Thursday from 4 to 5 or the Saturday from 4 to 5. There are some other times as well that I'll be at some different booths, kind of hanging out. And if you just see me around the show, come over and say hi. I'd love to meet you and hang out for a bit, chat about boats and this crazy project. We're gonna be giving away lots of these sticker packs here with Bolt Depot and Living for Sale stickers on them. I've got some other giveaways as well. And so I'll be doing updates throughout the week as I'm there. And so if you really wanna stay updated on what's happening at the show and where I'm gonna be at, it might be worth it to follow me on Instagram or Facebook, because that's where I'll be probably posting sort of the real-time updates. But yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. So thanks again to good folks at Bolt Depot. You can check out in the link down below. There's a coupon code there for 10% off anything that you want to order from them. Great folks, great products. So I'm really excited to be partnering with them on this little fun mission. And then we'll get back to the boat work once we're home. I know that's what a lot of you want to see is more boat work. So we're coming up with that. And speaking of boat work, let's get back to that engine. All right, next up, the flywheel housing and then the flywheel, and that's gonna give us something nice to hold on to for when we're bolting up the crank gear and the cam gear. With the flywheel and damper plate all mounted up now, it's time to move up to the timing gear side of things, the crank gear, the cam gear, and the oil pump. And this is where this all got started. In case you're just joining us now, we're rebuilding this old Yanmar. This keyway got all mashed up in the crank and it could actually pivot and turn, and so this engine was running kind of poorly. Probably should have never bought it, but So after getting that crank repaired, and you can check out this video to see that, we're ready to put this back together. Let's keep going. You might remember that in the previous video, the crank gear had these little pins, and one of them had gone completely missing, and we found it underneath the number 2 piston. But this time I'm going to press these in using a little bit of shaft retaining compound. Helps keep those in there, and then that will locate this governor plate with the little weights on there, and hopefully it won't get out of place this time. Here I'm using the new crank gear and then the original cam and oil pump gears. This might be a little bit controversial. It's true that you want the gears to mesh. In an ideal world, you'd replace everything. This is a risk that I'm going to take. It's budgetary mainly, but I think we're going to be just fine. The wear wasn't too severe on the teeth, so I think we'll be okay. Moving along, and it's almost time for the timing cover to go back on. Now this needs a little bit of a clean. We have to replace the seals. There's still a little bit of hardware in here for the oil pump system. And we are going to throw a new coat of paint on this once it gets bolted back up to the engine. So yeah, let's do a little bit of clean. I also noticed though inside that this bearing is a little bit clunky. And this is the right time to press it out and replace it. So I'm hoping I can just undo these little bolts here for the governor system. Move it slightly out of the way, press that bearing out. Let's see how it goes. Ready now to install the timing cover back on the engine. We've got it all cleaned up, new bearing in there, seals. Let's get moving. The gasket that came with this part here is a graphite laminated stainless steel insert gasket. And those I'm reading don't require any kind of sealant. They are best just left alone. And so we're gonna probably do that. Now, in other cases though, sometimes, do you use RTV? Do you use the gasket that it came with? A mix of both? There's other sealants. It's very confusing. I talked to an engine builder yesterday and he really recommended Permatex number 2 for sealing paper gaskets. So I actually did go ahead and remove the oil pan and reinstalled this with that sealant in here. It kind of acts as a little bit of a thin goop to fill in any imperfections. My thinking was that, well, even though I think the paper gasket will be okay, if the oil pan does leak, it's a real problem because you have to pull the whole engine back out. Whereas in other applications, you might be able to access it. So that's what we did for there. The timing cover we'll put on dry, and we will be able to replace that in the future if necessary. One thing that I noticed that is interesting, there's 2 little holes here, and these are for oil passageways that move from the pump to the oil filter. Now, I don't remember there ever being any O-rings on here, but I do see them mentioned in the manual, and when I reviewed the footage of pulling this part off, I don't see them there either. So someone was definitely in here before me and wasn't maybe as careful as can be. Hopefully there's been no damage from that. There are a couple O-rings here that help to seal those passages, and it looks like they came in the parts for engines kit, so we'll be putting those back in, thankfully. Well, enough yammering. Let's get the rest of the governor parts in here and then install the cover. I've been keeping all of the bolts organized on these cardboard sheets. This just helps to make sure you know exactly where each bolt goes. You'll probably be able to figure it out after the fact. Let's leave the motor now for a minute while we work on some of the peripherals that are going to attach to this thing. And we'll start here with the heat exchanger. So we have a few pieces that we need to put back onto the casting. We'll arrange those and we'll rebuild the internals, get it all sealed back up, ready to go back on the boat, ready for paint. It looks like our gasket kit might be missing a few of the gaskets that are specific to the F model. This is the one with the freshwater cooling, this big casting here. It's not a huge deal. We are actually probably going to just put those together with a gasket maker, so I'll go grab that in a second, and that should take care of those just fine. But something to be aware of if you're ordering the generic 3G30 kit. They might not always contain all of the smaller subvariant pieces. Now again, we're going to be replacing these old bolts with brand new ones from Bolt Depot. Gives everything a fresh coat of zinc. We're going to paint these anyways. And then of course we're putting in our new pipe nipples that came in from the Yanmar dealer. So let's get to work putting this thing back together. It looks like these have some thread sealant already on them. I am going to put just a little bit of the Permatex Aviation in there. That was recommended to me by the machinist that did the work on the motor. He says it's great stuff for this kind of application. Let's put a little bit in there to offset whatever this does and torque this down. We'll start with this little cap here that goes in the bottom of the unit, and that, I believe that holds the fuel filter. So we got our fresh bolts here. That's gonna look really nice. Now to seal this up, we're gonna use the Permatex Optimum Gray, and this one, it just says it has easier disassembly than their regular Ultra Gray. I don't know. It's like the same price. So let's get this on there. So to replace the gasket, we're just gonna squeeze it on, continuous bead all the way around, set this on, just doing one side, set this down. You finger tighten it. As soon as it starts to squeeze out, you stop, wait an hour, then torque it down, and it basically forms a custom gasket. So we're gonna find out how well that works. And now for the overflow pipe, same kind of procedure. It was originally installed this way, but the coolant tank on the boat is gonna be on the other side, I think, so we'll flip it over and do it that way. Now those need some time to set up, and we'll torque them down. So while we wait for that, let's get going on the transmission. All right, back again with the Kanzaki gearbox from this engine. This is the KM3P, and we just need to press the new seals in, get it prepped for paint, and then I guess we'll bolt it on and paint it all together. So I sort of teased this in a previous video. You can check it out up here where we got the seals removed, trying out a new seal puller that didn't work that great. But anyway, well, I'll put the new seals in now. Let's see what we can do. Okay, well that was funny. I actually got my pressers mixed up. So this is actually the one for the back. And I remembered that this one here has a depth offset because I did want that seal to go a little bit past the surface of the flange here, and I just forgot about that. So that's all the way put in the way we want now. So we can do the one on the output side. And this won't seal up until we put the flange back in though. But we can still get it in place. That's got the transmission pretty much ready to go in. We just need to put a little bit of paint on there. So we'll scuff the paint up, get that ready in a minute. But this should be dry. It's been over an hour now, and I can tell that it's definitely solidified quite a bit. So we're gonna torque these down now. It's interesting, there's like little squeeze out that kind of pulled through when I did that. Okay, so now we can start putting the heat exchanger back into the unit. So in a previous video, we did remove this, and I've since cleaned it up. We put it in some barnacle buster, let that remove all of the barnacles that were clogging up the holes. There are some little pins in the unit that help you to make sure you get it lined up. So let's fire that in there. Heat exchanger looking pretty good now. Should be all sealed up and leak free. We will find out later. We'll do a pressure test in a day or so. So let's move on to something else. And up next, even if just because Parts for Engines sent us the parts to do it, we're gonna rebuild this old raw water coolant pump. Well, it's definitely greasy and grimy. The bearings, they feel okay, honestly, but I think all the same, we'll just pop some new parts in here. The inside appears to be in relatively good shape. Let's get to work. You might remember from a previous video that the rubber impeller in here was starting to come apart a bit. That's pretty normal. Just a few cracks though starting to form on it. Overall, not too bad. And now the plate that mounts on the top and seals it all in is pretty worn. It's got a lot of circular grooves cut into it. So I'm happy to see that they've sent us a new one. That's gonna be good to replace. This one's actually been used on both sides to try to mitigate that damage. That's funny. Okay, well that was kind of weird. In the drawing it looks like, and this is sort of typical where you would push the bearings up against a shoulder. In this case, it looks like they were each pressed onto one side or the other of what in the drawing is called a spacer, but in reality was a circlip. So strange to find a part that doesn't match the drawing. There is also a little bit of wear here from the old seal, but let's rebuild it and see if we can get a little bit more life out of this old pump. Hi there, Editing John here. And of course, as I'm putting together this video, I realized that looking for that drawing so I could show you, there's actually two drawings for this raw water pump. And the one that I found first is of course not the one that is on the boat. So there is a second style of water pump, which actually looks more like the one that I pulled off once I started to look at this a little closer. And it is built exactly the way that the drawing shows. So kudos to Yanmar there for making their drawings correct. Make sure you have the right pump and that you're taking it apart correctly. Now, pulling two bearings apart that are separated by a circlip is kind of a tough thing to do. I don't know, you'd probably need a special tool to go in there and push them apart anyways. Yeah, we're gonna get this thing put back together, but make sure you know what you're doing before you start taking things apart. Lesson learned. Here we go. Okay, with a lot of those accessories now ready to go, let's take a look at the engine again. Now the head gasket that we'll be using for this is from Parts for Engines again, and it looks exactly like the original, which is what you want to see. But to seal this up on the head, we are going to use some of the Permatex copper spray. I like this stuff for head gaskets particularly. Now a couple of the head bolts are actually studs and they've come out along the way, so we're going to get those back installed here now. 86 foot-pounds to install these. It's quite a lot of torque. It was not easy to get these in, but they're home now and they look good. So we'll take one more look at the head here, make sure it's clear and ready to go. The gasket has been sprayed and is prepped and then ready to go on here. I'll give this a quick clean, make sure there's no contaminants on it, drop the gasket on and keep on moving. We're gonna seal up these cylinders. Hopefully they hold air. Now you might remember from when we took this apart that there's a sequence to tightening these, and it kind of has a crisscross pattern. And we're going to observe that, and we're going to do these in 3 steps. So we'll do 1/3 of the max torque, and then 2/3, and then the full torque. And there's 3 of these are actually kind of smaller, so they're going to be a little different value. So it's going to take a bit, but we'll get these all torqued down, and that should squish the head gasket down. We'll see. Now, something that I would have liked to have done before I took the head off initially is actually test the amount of space between the top of the piston and the bottom side of the head. Now there is a procedure for this where you actually put in a piece of fuse wire, they call it, or just solder, light solder, and you run the cylinder over to actually squish it and see how thick it is. And there's a spec that it's supposed to be, and if you're significantly more than that, you're not going to have enough compression to get the engine started and running really well. So let's check it now. Not much that we can do. All right, we have some news here. It's not great. We are like 0.3 millimeters, 1/3 of a millimeter, too much space. Is it going to make a big difference? I don't know. It's going to make some difference for sure. It's very small difference, but it's there. So in a perfect world, I would have measured this beforehand. It probably was already a little bit on the large side because as far as I can tell, the head gasket thickness is the same between the one that I took out and this one here that I've received. Maybe just a slight bit bigger, but we'll see how it runs. If it doesn't run, then I've got no other choice, but we'll find out soon. So we're gonna keep on going. Well, tune in next time to find out what we're gonna do about that head. That gap isn't quite right. Would you fix that? Would you leave it alone? Let me know in the comments down below. Now, we're gonna get back to this very soon with the rest of this video. It turned into a bit of a monster here, as you can tell, but a lot of details, and people seem to enjoy the details, those of you that follow this channel. So we're gonna keep going through the rebuild of this motor. It'll be probably one more video. We'll get it finished, and then we're gonna see if this thing actually starts. I'm hoping that I'll see some of you in the Annapolis area for the boat show. Really looking forward to meeting you guys, the viewers, also some fun creators that I can't wait to shake hands with, possibly share a beer. Now, if you're new to the channel and you'd like to get caught up from the beginning, you can check out this Yanmar build over here. There's a playlist, or perhaps the Antidote Sailboat repairs. We'll also put that up here. You can always hit this button to subscribe to the channel. See you next time. I'm excited to meet some other creators as well, possibly share a beer, but not sharing the same beer, like having a beer together at the same time. Does that make sense?